Hi, I'm Richard Tang, CEO of Zen Internet, and it's my very great pleasure today to invite to our Rochdale HQ someone who is one of the most influential and highly respected people in our industry, CEO of Openreach, Clive Selley. Clive, very, very warm welcome to Zen.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, great to have you here. Let's start with some news that is hot off the press this morning from Ofcom. Ofcom has decided not to prevent Openreach go ahead with their Equinox 2 discount program. Something that I am personally delighted about. Just want to hear your thoughts.
Okay, well, you're delighted and so am I, Richard. Equinox 2 was a fairly long time in the design. We went through a collaborative process talking to the team here at Zen, but also the teams at many other of the big service providers. So we think it's a deal that's been designed collaboratively by the industry for the industry. Fundamentally, it delivers lower prices for fibre to the premise service, which I think is good for the CPs like Zen, and it's good for end customers because it takes away the cost barrier to getting to highly reliable, high-speed service over full fibre broadband. And that's what surely all of us want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great news. I'm very happy. So let's talk about full fibre, something that is must be top of mind for everyone in Openreach. I mean, the rate that you are building is eye-watering. I think you built to 700,000 premises with full fibre in the last quarter. You've got this target of 25 million by the end of 2026. So could you give me an update on where you are now with your full fibre build, and I suppose level of confidence of getting to that actually huge target, 25 million?
Yeah, sure. It's very exciting. We delivered about 3.1 million of new homes passed in the last financial year. We'll beat that number this year. So we're still accelerating the build. And I'm pleased to say that we've spent a lot of time negotiating our CapEx arrangements, not just for the year to come, but actually for the next 4 years. And it's 4 years that we've got left to get to our 25 million target. As I think you and I have discussed, the aim is to get to 25 million just as quickly as possible. But it actually won't stop there. Because beyond that, there are still premises to serve in the UK. I think we'll be building beyond the 25 million at a lower rate per annum, but we're still going to be building, particularly in ultra-rural areas of the UK. I think the ultra-rural build will probably go on to 2030 or even beyond.
Yeah, and let's talk a bit about rural then, because I know that you've always had an ambition and desire and actually delivered by results to build to rural areas as well as to urban areas. A couple of years ago, you committed to build to 3 million rural areas. So be good to sort of hear of the 20 to 25 million that are to build to the target, what proportion was going to be rural, and then beyond the 25 million, I suppose beyond the government's target of 85% of the UK having access to gigabit speeds, you know, what's going to be the prospect for those rural customers that are longing for that full fibre connectivity from Openreach's perspective?
Yeah, so to date, we've built over 10.5 million premises passed, and over 3 million already are in rural, if we use Ofcom's Area 3 definition as being a reasonable proxy for rural. So 30% of UK homes are in the Ofcom definition, and we are almost spot on. 30% of our build is in rural. And we want to build in proportion. We want to serve the UK in all its geographic areas. So we're building in England, in Wales, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland. We're building in rural in proportion to to urban. That's my ambition for the Openreach build program. I think in the period beyond 25 million, even more of the homes passed will actually be in rural. We are hoping to participate in the government's gigabit program. And that, of course, is all about rural delivery. And I think some of that delivery will be in the out years after we've done the big blast to get to 25 million. You asked specifically how many rural premises in the first 25 million, and the internal program has a plan to get beyond 6. So that's where we're going. We're very focused on serving rural just as we serve urban and suburban UK.
And I've got in my head that it just costs more to build to rural. So I suppose, why is it that you've got such a focus on rural when, if you were just looking at it from a money perspective, you'd focus all your efforts on urban?
Yeah, so the economics are interesting, as you point out. Certainly costs more to build in rural. There's a price premium for building in rural, but actually in rural, because the copper line lengths tend to be longer, the copper broadband is not as good on the average as it is in urban and suburban areas. So what we experience is costs more to build, it's more labour intensive, there are more engineering challenges, but actually you get quicker take up when you build in rural. So it's a bit swings and roundabouts, Richard.
Let's talk about the AltNets. There's about 100 of them competing with you, obviously, of varying scale, some tiny ones, some bigger ones. I think the industry consensus is there's not going to be 100 in a few years' time. There's going to be some consolidation. There'll be some winners and losers. But as the biggest fibre builder with these smaller guys maybe snapping at your coattails, how do you see that industry, that market playing out, the whole AltNet market versus Openreach, I guess, as the incumbent fibre builder?
Okay, so I think the first thing to say is that it is a very competitive marketplace out there building fibre, and I think that's good for the country, actually. I think to have lots of us building means that we're building more in the aggregate than we would if there were fewer of us building, right? And that's what we see, don't we, today? My expectation is, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I do remember what happened to cable in the 90s. So there were many cable companies and gradually they consolidated. It wouldn't surprise me if there was some level of consolidation in the fibre build industry. I think that would be natural. But, only the AltNets themselves can speak authoritatively on that. I think the fact that we have competition and that it is very healthy here in the UK is good for the country. It's good for customers, and it's good for CPs like Zen.
Yeah, when I talk to the AltNets, overbuild is a really, really hot topic for them because it can make the difference between a business model that stacks up and a business model that doesn't, with too much overbuild. But from Openreach's point of view, I guess particularly with such a big target of the UK to build to, how much, if at all, is overbuild a factor when you're planning building networks or thinking about commercials?
So we don't think much about overbuild. We just don't do that. Right. We have a copper network today. We'd love to transform that to the extent that we can afford to a full fibre network, so that the nation has access to great fibre. I think it's healthy if others also build, because that creates a competitive tension, and I think through that means we all optimise our service and our pricing. I think it's healthy.
Yeah, so much less of a hot topic for Openreach than for pretty much all the AltNets, to be honest. And again, comparing Openreach with the AltNets, one thing that the AltNets a lot of the AltNets have done, have offered symmetric speeds.
Yep.
So they're using the same gigabit passive optical network technology is Openreach. They're offering Symmetric. Openreach is offering lower upload to download, so asymmetric speeds. I guess the question, why is that? Have you got any plans to change that? Because at the moment, the AltNets are using that as a selling point over Openreach.
So there's nothing stopping us per se in launching symmetric services. Right now, we have very, very healthy order inflow for the asymmetric services that we're selling. So it doesn't feel to me right now like an imperative to launch symmetric services. And in fact, our latest products are simply higher speed asymmetric services. So as you know, we've launched a 1.2 gig and 1.8 gig service, and we'll see how that goes before considering anything else.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the 1.4 and the 1.8, looking forward to those. So in terms of the extent of availability of those, what's that at the moment, the 1.4, 1.8?
Well, they're in trial right now. They're about to be available nationally.
Okay, fantastic. Good. So the challenge for the customers is finding something to do with all that huge amount of bandwidth.
Yes, and I think history teaches us that applications perhaps that we can't even predict will come along and will be more bandwidth intensive. That's what history teaches us over the last 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's been in the news recently an announcement about job cuts at BT wide. I think the BT statement said between 40 and 55,000 jobs, including contractors, are potentially on the chopping block. Some of those are going to be within Openreach. There's reference to the end of the fibre build programme. So in terms of, from an Openreach perspective, what's your view on what will happen to jobs? How many of those will be in Openreach? When will they happen? Why will they happen?
So I think the first thing to say is that we are even more busy now than we were last year. We're going to be even busier next year than this year, building at an ever faster rate on the fibre platform. And we have every hope that sales will increase as build increases. So we're going to have a lot of provisioning work ahead of us. So it's not like we're running out of work, Richard. We've got a lot to do. But what is absolutely true is that some years from now, when most of our customers are on a fibre network, not a copper network, then there will be fewer faults to deal with by our engineering force, and we will need fewer people to handle those faults. And the build program itself will be hugely busy for the next 4 or 5 years, but then it will ramp down. So those two things are true. And in the out years, 2030, we will require fewer people. Quite how many fewer is yet to be established. I'm not scared by the issue. I think we will reduce the scale of our organisation mostly through natural attrition. And through releasing contract labour. So this isn't, I don't envisage some painful redundancy programme at scale. I don't think that is where we're heading at all.
Yeah, certainly the comment that was published from the CWU seems like that they're accepting of the situation and just asking that you start with the contractors before the permanent people, and that sounds like what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're a technologist. I'm a technologist. You must have at least some interest in AI. A lot of talking about AI in the press, and actually, we're really interested in it in Zen to see what it can do. I guess if you look into the future, what are your views, Clive, on the impact of AI on Openreach, but not just on Openreach, I suppose, as on businesses and society in general?
Yeah, I think AI is both super exciting and perhaps a little bit super scary as well. The idea that we can be outthought by machines or by software programs, you need to get your head around that, I think. I think what we don't understand is the limitations of AI, and we don't understand, there's a lot to be debated about the ethics of letting computer programs make deep decisioning without human intervention. So I think this tech is in the early stages. It's all very super exciting, and you can get it to write your school exam paper for you. We've all seen that. As usual, the kids are leading the way.
Yeah, like my daughter.
Yeah, like your daughter. And we've a lot to explore in terms of how we use it in the workplace, I think. One of my first thoughts, of course, is that mostly what we do in Openreach is physical engineering. If you watch us build a network, we've got people climbing poles and putting connectorized block terminals up there or pulling cables through ducts. That work is work for humans. That will not be done by AI, but maybe choosing routes or scheduling work, maybe AI will optimize all of that and make us a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that.
Yeah.
But much of our work is physical work. So I think probably Openreach will be impacted a little less than some other industries and companies out there.
Yeah, and I think even when we've looked at it at Zen for non-physical work, when we've looked at ChatGPT, GPT-4, what we found is this is technology, as with many other bits of technology, that helps people do the more repetitive and mundane parts of their job, but it's not replacing people, and it's got limitations. I think the industry calls it hallucination. So it hallucinates sometimes, which is a really euphemism for meaning it just lies, but they don't want to say that.
Yeah.
So I think it's a helpful technology, but we're a way off it.
Well, one of the things that scares me about it is that it's only as good as the information it can access.
Yes.
And when I think about the global internet, it's full of great and accurate information, but it's also full of a load of rubbish as well.
It really is.
And I worry about how an AI engine can discern the good info from the nonsense info.
Yeah.
Because that matters hugely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we know, there's been a few examples of AI chatbots having to be turned off very quickly when they start to become racist and whatever. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. But really interested. Let's switch to the PSTN switch off again. Something that is a massive project for Openreach. Actually, it's a big project for Zen as well, because we need to get all our customers off the old PSTN network onto the new technologies, and ideally full fibre. So where is Openreach up to with the PSTN switch off? What's there left to do? What are the big challenges? Again, there's a date, I think, of 2025 to actually switch it off. So, I mean, just talk to me a bit about the challenge of doing that and when it's all going to happen.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to say is it's an industry-wide challenge, right? So, it's an Openreach thing. Why? Because we sell WLR, which is the access product that gets retail CPs like Zen access to the PSTN switches. So we will put WLR on stop sell from September this year. It's huge for CPs because you basically got to move your voice base of customers from old style PSTN to VoIP, to voice over IP, and the number of customers consuming old style telephony is big. It's 10 million plus. It's a lot of customers and a lot of households. And I think it's made even more complex by the fact that the PSTN service is used for things that perhaps it wasn't even intended for in its original design. So an example would be care alarms that some vulnerable people, elderly people, disabled people have operate over the PSTN. So we've got to make sure that not just the, as it were, raw voice PSTN service is replaced, but that all these other services that have been built on the back of PSTN continue to work or are replaced by suitable new services. So this is really complicated. And then I think there's another complication, which is that the PSTN offers a trickle charge, a direct current trickle charge, which is also very useful in some applications. I think, sensors on sluice gates are often using the trickle current as a source of power, right? We don't want all the dams flooding as a result of withdrawing PSTN. So there are these small niche cases where the PSTN current itself is being used. And whilst, they are niche, they're sort of critical national infrastructure type niche. So all of that has got to be solved. The PSTN switch off is scheduled for end of 2025, so barely 2.5 years away, and it has to be turned off because the electronics is aging fast, very, very fast. This is a platform that was put in the early 80s, and we're now in the early to mid 2020. So it's served more than a useful life, and it's coming to end of life. So there isn't a choice here, because this stuff's going to degrade rapidly. It's just an end of life problem, and we have to move off it.
Definitely. Well, we're at Zen. We've got lots of activity to try and get our customers across, and I'm sure we'll do it in time. I hope we will, anyway. I know that you've got a big interest and focus on sustainability, and in fact, related to this PSTN switch off, I understand there's a big environmental gain in terms of carbon footprint in switching off the PSTN. Can you tell me a bit about that?
So Richard, it's really very significant. So largely because the PSTN is based on very early electronics, it's discrete electronics rather than electronics comprising a lot of intricate integrated circuits. So the electronics consumes a lot of electricity, and it's not just at the PSTN layer, it's at the transmission layer below. So it uses PDH technology, which is also very aged, and there's a huge carbon footprint benefit through turning off the platform. So that's very good news for the planet, basically, if not just us but all countries can turn off their PSTN and replace it with VoIP service. But at Openreach, we have a big responsibility and accountability for reducing our carbon footprint. And we are today a part of the problem, right? So I have, for example, 28,000 vans on the roads of the UK, and most of those vans are diesel. So they are generating carbon emissions. We're on a journey to replace the fleet with electric vehicles, which works for the planet as long as we're buying, renewable electricity. So, which is our intention. By the end of this financial year that we're now in, we'll be just shy of 5,000 electric vehicles. And in deploying that fleet, we're sort of exploring and understanding the obstacles in deploying electric vehicles. So, for example, where an employee of ours who has a van has either a garage or a driveway, we'll install a home charging appliance. Where our employees live in big cities, often they don't, and we can only use public charging infrastructure, and the public charging infrastructure is underdeveloped in the UK. So we're already learning where there are deficiencies in the infrastructure that supports electric vehicles. And then we've a big accountability on the sustainability agenda because we use stuff, right? We use, millions of miles of fibre cable. We use plastic coated componentry like connectorized block terminals. We use blue rope. Hundreds and thousands of miles of blue rope, which has a high plastic content. So in each of these areas, we're trying to make a difference. So the blue rope, we now do two things. We buy blue rope with less plastic in the content, and we have a proactive program of recycling. So not in the sense of turning it into teapots or something, but in the sense of reusing it. So use it over and again. So you use less blue rope in the aggregate every year. We've moved from cable drums that are made of plastic to cable drums that are made of stiff cardboard because they can be recycled. So, we are a company with a high carbon footprint, and our job is to reduce in every which way the amount of stuff we use, and where we do use stuff, to have it recyclable or reusable. We're making steps, but we've got a long way to go.
Just on the sustainable, I mean, the EV charging thing's an interesting one because I've got an EV myself. I've had one since 2019.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a nightmare. I think there was one point that I was up in Newcastle, 11 o'clock at night, having visited about 5 different charging points, and I was like, give me a diesel. This is a nightmare. So I suppose, I concur that the charging infrastructure is not there. I mean, have you got a view that there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation? Does the government need to do more, or is this something that can be left to private investment to build that infrastructure that we need? I think particularly in cities where people haven't got a garage that they can install their own charging point.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to take everybody to contribute to solving this problem. So I think we do need government intervention, both at the national level and at the local level. Ultimately it's councils who allow us or others to install charging points, public charging points. So both national and local government and big companies. So we are putting chargers into our yards at the big telephone exchanges, and we're also exploring whether it's practical to create public charging points adjacent to VDSL cabinets, because they have an electricity feed from the DNO. Could we create charging points? It's not a daft idea in principle, because we have 90,000 of those cabinets, and that would be a lot of charging points if it were practical to twin them with the cabinets.
Yeah, and I guess you engineers that work on the cabinets can charge the car while they're doing
their work. Yeah,
fantastic. Okay, Last question. As CEO of Openreach, what's your biggest challenge in 2023?
I think
you'll have a few.
No, I'll have a few. So I'll give you a list of 500. So the overriding challenge for us, given that we're doing so much engineering work, building the network, migrating customers to the network, is actually safety. Right, I'm very, very concerned that what we do, up poles, down holes, in the streets, that we do safely, not just for Openreach employees, but for our contract employees and also members of the public. If we get this wrong, people could get hurt, and I don't want that. And my second challenge is the one that we've talked about throughout the discussion, which is we've got to keep accelerating the fibre build program and the migration program, taking customers from copper to fibre network. So I'll offer you just 2.
Okay, fantastic. Clive, thank you so much for spending the time, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.